we would lose a scrim and he would just throw his mouse at the wall. And then like, we would just be sitting there in silence and he'd be like, could someone please pick up my mouse? And it just like that kind of stuff in OCA teams just happens.
Joining me, of course, is Coach Spookz, Samuel Broadley, the pride of, I guess, which OC team? Order? Chiefs.
I'll claim Chiefs, yeah.
Okay.
Order fell apart. So we don't talk about them.
Was that the Rusty? Who was coaching at that time?
We had Spawn.
Oh, was that Spawn?
Yeah.
Spawn's fault. I blame Spawn.
Yeah, Spawn's fault. That was a little bit of a classic OS disaster, that one, but it is what it is.
What is another classic OS disaster?
Tainted Minds, Rich Gang.
Okay.
There's been a few. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Tainted Minds, that didn't feel like an OS disaster. It just felt like a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
All right. Sorry. Got an arrow. All the coaches are just getting pulled into this
Hitting
one.
home straight away.
Yeah. That's how. Yeah, this is our first interview together in a little while or ever. So, other than soccer, part of esports soccer.
Yeah.
And
one day. One night.
Esports volleyball.
Esports
volleyball.
A little bit better. Volleyball.
Yeah. Goodness. Yeah, we haven't done that in a while. 1 and 2 to kick things off of MSI, off of just the amazing split that you guys had last year. Do you consider last year like a fairy tale run or something of that nature, like an anomaly?
Yeah. It's funny because so you look at our roster on paper, and it's like at the start of the split, it didn't look that strong.
Yeah, if you look at the roster at the start of the split, I was like, yeah.
Exactly. Everyone's like, oh, obviously Golden Guardians should finish bottom 5, whatever.
Yeah.
When we looked at the roster, we had a bit of a different take because it's not as if we had like a full rookie roster where it's like we're coming in, we're developing. We actually had a veteran roster. We have a veteran roster. So our expectations were like, well, we got to perform now.
Yeah.
And we worked with Stixay and Licorice for the previous 2 years, and we always kind of had the thought that, well, these guys are good, but we can't get this like group working because, you know, we're a bit weaker in other parts, team dynamic, that kind of stuff. So we kind of just tried to pull the pieces that we thought were valuable and then bring in other pieces to make up the rest of the team.
Yeah.
I will say we did better than we expected, for sure, but we were still definitely trying to aim for top 4, top 5. Yeah.
Okay. So then to go from what your expectations were at the beginning of the split to what actually happened, to getting to go international, right, and get that experience. Everyone always talks about the MSI Hangover. Do you feel like that played a part in it?
Yeah, well, to avoid getting into like the specifics.
Sure.
We had some issues with like meta, and
at MSI?
At MSI.
Okay.
Sorry. And we didn't feel we adapted well enough to the meta. And the natural reaction is to like, okay, well, this is what Eastern teams are playing. Like, we need to learn to play like this, or hyper carries, tanks, etc.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious to everyone. Which, going into this season, like we felt we really need to like shore up that area in case the meta goes there again, going towards playoffs and worlds. So that hangover that we're probably seeing from week 1, I feel is like a bit of us trying to transition our play style, and today even is like us kind of being like, oh, we can't lose 3 in a row, like we've got to kind of go back to like side lanes and like collapsing, because that was something we were good at in split 1. So in terms of like the hangover, I feel like it comes from my perspective from kind of like us trying to adapt and not being able to do it fast enough. Yeah,
sure. And I appreciate that because you know, anytime there is those type of regression stigma, whether it is the MSI hangover or a sophomore slump, like so many players fall into that. Rarely do we get to go into the specifics of why and start categorizing the different types of those regressions and being, I guess, meta slavey to all of a sudden being like, we need to win.
Yeah.
Which goes to my next question, which is, with this season being compressed down and now it's 3 games instead of 2, you have less time to ramp up. What else other than maybe like champs is the kind of pressure that comes with that?
It's hard because it's kind of like you want to have your focus for the whole split. Like, ideal world, you're peaking in playoffs and then you're peaking towards worlds.
Sure.
I think a lot of teams in the past particularly have fallen into like the trap of like, we need to go do well at worlds and then collapse and don't even make worlds. I think there was like TL, for example.
Yeah.
Our concern is like, well, we need to be able to perform at worlds. Otherwise, like, why are we going there?
Yep.
But also like, we need to make it there. And I think finding that balance is really tricky, honestly. I feel like it's probably easier from an outside perspective to be like, oh, these guys can just plug and play tanks. Like, you just group around Dragon, Baron, like, it's simple. It's not that simple. It's a much slower, like, grueling process than people probably think from the outside.
Sure.
So, yeah, we're kind of in that phase right now where it feels like we're a little bit awkwardly in between, like, figuring out, like, we need to win now. And having, as you said, like, the season condensed into 6 weeks makes it, that pressure even harder to deal with, yeah.
Is there a difference in the approach or the types of things you're feeling, given the fact that you're no longer just underdogs? No one really expect anything out of you right now. You're pinned as like 3rd or 4th, like rather than 8th or 9th, like at the beginning of last year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, even as a player, I've been on teams where there's been no expectations, and you kind of just go out there and you're like enjoying yourself, and it kind of just naturally falls into place. I think people can overlook the natural like enjoyment for the game actually increases the performance.
Yeah.
For us, having those expectations, it does feel a lot different. We're trying to keep the atmosphere as best we can consistent. Like from Split 1, we felt like we had a good dynamic where everyone can contribute, everyone feels like they can make plays. We don't want to make the environment too rigid, and that's been keeping the goal. But then, as you said, naturally, like the outside pressure like is unavoidable to an extent.
Yeah.
So yeah, time will tell to see kind of how we deal with that.
Yeah. I guess lastly, as we look forward, 4 more weeks left in the split, which is crazy. What is the specific thing you want to see your team do by week 5?
Yeah, by week 5, there's going to be so many changes coming into the game.
Yeah.
I think primarily for us, I just want to make sure that like we find a style that works for us that also can work in the meta. Kind of the same rhetoric, but we need to like, and there's lots of like internal discussions happening right now, but it's like we need to understand what we're good at and what's good in the meta, and if we can find that balance, I think we'll do well, and that's kind of the goal.
True last question, just because I feel like we've been hitting the meta rhetoric a lot.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
It's definitely the topical
You're
thing.
definitely in coach mode. You've had a storied career as a player as well. I want you to tell me a story about an old teammate. Just any old teammate you've ever played with, preferably someone that isn't playing anymore.
Right.
Which, there's normally when I ask the vets this, it's fine. But like, give me a story of an old teammate that, deserves to get a chuckle or a laugh.
I'm trying to think of one that's like
appropriate. Yeah, I know.
It's like,
that's always the hardest part.
It's challenging. I think the funniest thing is just like when you're in like an OC team dynamic.
Yeah.
The team culture environment is much different than like NA environment where everyone's very direct and the emotions kind of like no one conceals any kind of emotions.
Sure.
Like there'd be stuff like we had Radier, who was like kind of an infamous player in OC.
Yep.
He would just like we would lose a scrim and he would just throw his mouse at the wall, and then like we would just be sitting there in silence and he'd be like, could someone please pick up my mouse? And it's just like that kind of stuff in OC teams just happens just so much more consistently than you'd think. As I said, big culture difference, but yeah, that kind of stuff.
All right. Yeah. Spookz, again, the transition to coach and finding success the way that you have has been impressive. And again, just one of the general good guys in the space. So thanks, man, for your time, and congrats on today's win.
Awesome.
Good luck with the rest of the split.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. For more, make sure to subscribe over at Esports. Thanks, guys. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.